Hey, what's up, guys? So we got a few things to talk about, including Affliction Buffs coming today, Tuesday, and some nerfs coming to Tome, so let's jump right into it. Alright, so jumping right into it. There are some buffs coming on Tuesday for Affliction. Doom Blossom damage increased by 10%, Vile Taint damage increased by 25%, Soul Flame damage increased by 20%, and Soul Rot damage increased by 5%. Also, Destruction's getting a bunch of buffs as well, which I don't fully understand that, but, you know, it's fine. Alright, it's all good. I think that they were doing fine, but alright, not worried about that. That's not what this video is about. The Doom Blossom damage increase is actually pretty solid. I think that we were already probably leaning towards Doom Blossom in every situation, including Tyrannical, for the most part in most of these keys. And this might solidify that even more, just because it was about a 10 to 12% swing in either direction if you chose Dread Touch or Doom Blossom, if you watched my Affliction Guide video. Granted, I think those numbers are a little iffy, but that's kind of a general idea, right? If you go Doom Blossom or you go Dread Touch. With an additional 10% buff to Doom Blossom, I feel like in most of these keys, the value from Doom Blossom was already pretty high and now is significantly higher. So I think in most situations, we're probably going to be playing Doom Blossom unless you really, really feel like you're just lacking that much single target, which down the line may be the case in higher keys. We'll see how that goes. I'll definitely keep you guys updated, so be sure to subscribe all for that. Vile Taint by 25% is actually pretty big. Like, that's a very big damage buff to Vile Taint. And the Soul Rot 5%. I'll look at some of my damage profiles, or I guess my details log from a couple keys that I did a couple nights ago. And I'm not going to do math because there's no math. We'll just look at it a little bit and get an idea. Soul Flame damage by 20%. Interesting. I feel like this is only applicable in some situations. Obviously, it's just kind of free damage in certain situations, but I think we'll definitely see an increase in situations like the Tree boss in Algathar Academy, where Soul Flame actually gets a lot of value on that boss. A lot of people think of Soul Flame is kind of like not real damage because it happens at the end of a fight, but in situations where you have a bunch of little mobs dying around a big mob, I think Soul Flame is actually very solid. Specifically like first boss in Algathar Academy, if you do tree first, sort of, right? Or any other trees that happen like in Brackenhide, where there's like the tree guys after a second boss. Anything that's just exploding around a target doing a bunch of damage is, in my opinion, nothing. So a 20% to that's pretty solid, I should say. But these two, the Vile Taint and the Soul Run, I think are really interesting because I think this goes back to what I talked about in the guide, where in higher keys or in situations where you feel like the target's going to live long enough for your dots to have their full duration, I think this is even more important now by spending your Raptures, your first 3 Raptures after Soul Rot, to extend your dots, because now Vile Taint damage doing 25% increased damage and Soul Rot by 5. When we look at my details breakdown from the last couple of keys, you'll see Soul Rot and Vile Taint were already pretty high, specifically Soul Rot. Vile Taint was alright, but now increasing the duration of those dots is going to be even more important in most situations. In low keys, I think you'll still just dump seeds, but if you can have those dots rolling for the entire time on a bunch of mobs, you know, as many as you can possibly have, which is 8, it's definitely pretty impactful. The other big thing that's happening that I do want to mention real quick is Tome of Unstable Power, which if you've been on watching the stream, you know I farmed this thing essentially all week. It took me 41 runs to get this thing, so if you're there hanging out, I appreciate that. But it did get nerfed, and we joked about this all week, that this Trinket was probably going to get nerfed, so it finally did. Originally, they were going to nerf it by 20% and put a target cap on it. They reverted to 20% and only put a target cap. I think this Trinket is probably still going to be one of our best. I have a few sims that I did. I didn't input any, like, this is not even including the buffs to Affliction. This is just right now if we were to sim it. And then we're just kind of, I didn't do really anything over 8 targets. I think I might have done one that's like 10. This is just 8 bosses. You can see Tome and Icon are still the best. This is a 5 target, or sorry, this is 8 target, 5 minutes. I usually do 5 minutes. I talk about it in the guide as well with Doom Blossom. You can see Tome, definitely still the best. Spoils Tome is kind of the combo I'm running right now. Icon, Tome, these are at like max eye level, by the way. But I think the thing that's really interesting is this is still 8 targets, so this is not changing on Tuesday. The more thing that's changing is in even pulls that are beyond 8, but a lot of these keys have bigger pulls, but I actually don't know how many pulls are significantly past 8. I mean, as you get higher and higher keys, there's definitely going to be some, but the value of Tome, I think, is gone down a little bit, but not as much as it might have, you know, if the 20% had gone through. With that being said, I do think there are some pretty solid alternatives, including Icon and OCE again. They're a little interesting on this list. Obviously, you know, Sims are Sims, but I really do think the value of Icon and OCE has bumped up significantly. I think this one's just has to do with the 5-minute sim. Consistent damage will always be higher, right? This is just a Dungeon Slice, which Dungeon Slice I take with kind of a grain of salt. Dungeon Slice is very interesting. I would not by any means gear your character on Dungeon Slice, but I like to pull it up because I feel like they've gotten a little bit more accurate. So sometimes I like to sim and just see what it says. Spindle Icon being here, well, it is a little bit down. This combination is very interesting to me. I actually think Spindle Icon is the combo that I was originally going to play before we saw how powerful Tome was. And Spindle OCE is a similar situation. So in my opinion, the value of these two trinkets has actually gone up significantly. This is a 10 boss, 5 minutes without the Tome nerf, by the way. I didn't put any Tome nerf in, like I said. So just give you an idea. Tome, for me, I didn't include Tome in this sim at all. Let's just say that. So without Tome being involved in the equation, again, OCE and Icon just for consistency's sake, but Spoils and OCE are pretty high up there in comparison to this, right? So, and Spindle and OCE. I'm probably gonna be running Spindle like I mentioned in the guide. So the combination of these two I find very interesting. Granted, I still think Tome is going to be very, very viable, but I kind of want to just briefly mention with some sims that I did right now without the buffs to Affliction that some of the trinkets were actually pretty interesting without mentioning Tome, right? So this is another 5 boss, 5 minutes. You can see OCE and Tome, right? I included that one in here. Icon and Tome again. This is again not changing on Tuesday, so another interesting combination. I think again, you know, like passive trinkets are always going to sim higher in a 5-minute sim, so take that what you will. But I just think it was interesting to look at, right? Same with, I think it's just a single target sim. So obviously Spindle Suncaller, but then Spindle Rage Feather, Spindle Icon again for single target. So just something I wanted to put out there. I didn't include Tome in this sim at all, but something to keep in mind while you're looking at it. So let's jump over and look at the details from a couple of my previous runs, and we'll kind of just compare the numbers to this. I'm not going to do much math, but just to give an idea of, you know, stuff is getting bumped up that is pretty impactful in our keys. I'm not by any means thinking this is going to put us over Destro, but I think it might bring us a little bit closer to Demo in some situations, and definitely bring our AoE up in comparison to the other two specs. So let's jump over there. All right. So with all that stuff in mind, I kind of just want to quickly go over a few like details meters that I had from the previous runs that I did, and kind of just look at them a little bit overall with the buffs in mind. I could have done some sims. I'm not super great as far as like raid bots is concerned, as like strings of inputting like updates to like buffs and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of want to just look at what I know from key situations and seeing what those damage things did, and then to kind of just get an idea of what that is, you know, what that might look like on Tuesday for my exact character in that situation, right? So I kind of just want to look at that. So looking at, first I'm going to go over this Halls of Infusion 13 that we did. We had an AUG in this key, so take that as you will, right? But Soul Rot was already my 4th highest thing, right? That's going up by 5%. That'll bump it up like, I don't know, just under 70 million probably. Doom Blossom going up by 10% would bump this up to like 55 million in this situation, right? These are all rough numbers, right? I'm not gonna do a bunch of math here, but I kind of just want to look at the breakdown. This being target capped will definitely bring this down. This is the Tome trinket, by the way. It was my 6th highest damaging. Literally beat out UA. Vile Tank getting buffed by 25% though would bring this probably closer in line to around Doom Blossom value if this was a perfect situation, right? So Soul Rot would move up, not as high as Agony, but it would definitely move up a little bit. Vile Taint would probably come up a little bit closer to Doom Blossom in this situation, and then Soul Flame value, which was 14, would probably go up by like another like 2 million or something like that in situation. Again, these are all like rough estimates, but just looking at in this situation, all of those buffs would significantly move some of our higher impacting things, including Doom Blossom, which again, I think, as this was a 4 key, but I think Doom Blossom's value has become significantly more impactful than it was in the past, solely because of the dungeons and the way that pulls are structured now this season compared to last season. So while you still can run the Dread Touch build, and I think there might still actually be some situations for the Dread Touch build, Doom Blossom value has definitely skyrocketed. So looking at this 13 Academy idea that didn't have an AUG in it. Again, you can see Doom Blossom value very high in this key is number 3 for me. This is an Academy, so you know there's a lot of decently sized AoE pull. So this going up by 10%, that's gonna move it pretty high, if not above Rapture in this situation potentially, which would actually be pretty insane. Soul Rock going up additional like 5% would bring this, you know, probably a little over 50 million. This going down a little bit because this Trinket's target capped, right? And then Soul Flame in Academy, like I mentioned in the beginning, this going up by 20% in this key in particular would actually be pretty significant. Let's look at the Overgrown Ancient boss. I mean, if you look, Soul Flame is my number 2 damage on that fight, right? We're doing Seed of Corruption for Soul Flame value. Doom Blossom, a little bit of padding, maybe just like a little bit. But it's definitely an interesting ability on that fight, and there's a few other situations where Soul Flame gets some value too, but that's definitely an interesting buff. If we look at this 12 RLP that I did the other night, kind of get a similar idea. Doom Blossom, again, about the same situation as it was in that Halls of Infusion, right? It was number 4 for the RLP, number 5 for the Halls of Infusion. Just to give you an idea on that. So that getting buffed a little bit. Again, the Trinket coming down a little bit. Definitely, I think in some keys it's not as valuable, so I think that might, you know, move it around a little bit. But I think those buffs overall are pretty good. I think will definitely help. I think it's interesting they're pointing us further in the AoE direction than trying to maybe adjust our single target outside of Dread Touch. I think that would be just adjusting some other things, like making our dots a little bit stronger or something like that for single target, but hey, buffs are buffs, so we're not going to complain about any of that. Outside of that, I did want to briefly mention what talents I think might be a little bit more comparable if you're not going to run Tome, like if we eventually see next week that maybe Tome isn't as worth it. We don't have our second bullion to spend next week, and we do have the 3rd raid, so in my opinion, it's not the biggest deal unless you haven't spent your bullion yet, but even then, I think your first bullion should be spent on Dreambinder, like I mentioned in the guide. But I am definitely a little bit more interested in Icon and OCE now, and Fractured Heart. I think Fractured Heart is an interesting trinket, solely for Affliction and every caster, but we can't really see the value of this on details and on logs. As far as the execute is concerned, at least I can't see that. So if you have a way to, you know, if you have information on how to see that information on logs or in details, let me know. I've heard there might be like a string or something you can put in details to kind of get some of that information. But either way, I think this trinket's really interesting. It's really good for us as single target. It's actually one of our best trinkets if you're not going to run Spindle and Suncaller. But on tyrannical weeks or, you know, just in general, this trinket might actually go up in value a little bit. Maybe not necessarily over Tome, but definitely something to keep an eye out for if you're looking for something other than Tome, or while you're farming Tome, you'll probably get one of these as well, so hang on to that. But Spindle plus OCE, Icon, Tome, Suncaller, all of those are actually pretty substantial trinkets in my opinion. As I said in the guide, I don't really want to run Spindle and Suncaller, so I will probably be looking more towards running Spindle Tome, Spindle OCE, Spindle Icon. I wouldn't necessarily spend my next bullion on Icon or Tome or on OCE. I'm probably gonna be spending my next bullion on Spindle, just for a mythic Spindle, because I don't really plan on killing mythic Nimue anytime soon. So that's probably what my next bullion will be. But I kind of want to just briefly hop on here, talk to you guys a little bit about that. All right, guys, I think that about wraps it up. Hopefully these buffs go through and we see some solid changes to Affliction. I don't think these are anything massive for us, but I do think any buff is a great buff, right? You know what I mean? The fact that they're acknowledging that we need some help is a great start for us. The fact that they're acknowledging that we're even here is a great start for us, you know? I haven't made any videos specifically talking about the talents that are coming on the War Within, but there are some great things happening over there. I currently don't have access to Alpha. That's kind of one of the reasons why I haven't really done it quite yet, but I will be making a video kind of talking about my thoughts about the talents and things like that. I'll be doing that really soon. So keep an eye out for that. If you're interested in that, hit the subscribe button. Like I said, I'm just going to go over my thoughts on the talents. Because I don't have access to Alpha, I can't really test them myself, but I can still give my opinions about those kind of stuff. So if you're interested in that, be sure to check that out. I did go over it on stream before, so there is like a highlight on my channel if you're interested in just my initial thoughts. But until then, hopefully that helps you guys out. And yeah, so keep an eye out for any other videos like this one. If you're interested in this, be sure to let me know. But if there's anything Affliction that you guys want to know about or anything like that, you can always come by the stream, twitch.tv/Arson, hang out. Obviously, I'll be reacting to it then. But if there's anything substantial that happens, kind of like what these buffs are, I think these are actually pretty decent for us. I will make a video talking about that for the YouTube as well. So hopefully that helps you guys, especially with the Tome change. I wanted to kind of make a video because I mentioned that in my guide as well. So if you haven't watched that already, I will still say I think Tome is probably one of my bigger suggestions, but it's something that is definitely lower on the scale now as far as Trinkets are concerned, but it's still probably best, if not the best, for most situations. So check out that Affliction guide if you're interested in Affliction this season, or come by the stream like I already said. If you got any questions about Affliction, you can join the Discord, all that good stuff. But thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.